James, you're an attorney, and you had to go to school for quite some time to become an attorney, correct?
That's right.
Well, today's guest, we're interviewing today's guest, who is a biomedical research scientist. His name is Dr. James Lyons Weiler. And this guy blew my mind. Did he blow your mind as well?
Absolutely.
I mean, we asked him about the death rate of COVID-19. We asked him about hydroxychloroquine, its safety. We asked him about the treatments that have been shown to treat people effectively from COVID-19. We asked him if we should be trusting Dr. Fauci. We get into the business with this guy. Did he not blow your mind?
Blew my mind. Duct tape wrapped around it right now, as you can see.
Folks, if you're listening right now and you have any fear in your heart or mind about COVID-19, today's show is going to be the cure that you need to no longer live in fear from the COVID-19 virus. In fact, I believe after you hear today's show and today's interview with Dr. James Lyons Weiler, you're going to say it's game over for COVID-19.
Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top, teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of five, that's why I'm a dive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the C&Z up on your radio, and now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom and we'll show you.
Yes, 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 and yes. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is going to blow your mind. This is a guy who is a doctor, but check it out. He's not trying to sell you a vaccine. See, this is a doctor without a conflict of interest. A doctor on the scene today is not trying to sell you a vaccine. Dr. James, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Clay. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Dr. James, you are sort of a big deal. You're a biomedical research scientist, but I have to not that Satan needs an advocate, but I have to be the devil's advocate on today's show. I have to ask the questions that the skeptics might ask. So what is your educational background?
I have a PhD in ecology, evolution, and conservation biology, postdoc in computational molecular biology, master's in zoology, and an undergraduate in biology. But I worked in biomedical research for 20 years.
Where did you go to school?
SUNY Oswego, Ohio State University, University of Nevada, and Penn State University.
How many years did you go to school?
Oh gosh, all of them. I think it was to get my PhD, it was like 7 years.
Oh man. Okay. So I'm going to fire through some tough questions coming in fast. Can we do it? Should we be trusting Dr. Anthony Fauci? He's been in office since 1984. He's on record saying you shouldn't shut down the border. You should shut down the border. You shouldn't wear a mask. You should wear a mask. Hydroxychloroquine is safe. It's unsafe. This guy, he's pitching everything. He's given us a lot of pitches. The most accurate pitch I've seen him throw was the pitch at the Nationals game. But, sir, should we be trusting Dr. Anthony Fauci?
Well, if it comes down to the question of trust, you have to see what people do and only listen half of what they say. And what Dr. Fauci has done is he's orchestrated public opinion to the point where on the issue of vaccination, there's a stalemate. And what the pharmaceutical companies that make vaccines have figured out is that they win on all of the issues about vaccines with any stalemate. And so, no, I don't trust Dr. Fauci. He's an apologist for CDC's deadly testing fiasco. The CDC refused a German-made test that was very, very accurate back in January 16th. CDC then tried to blame President Trump for the release of the patient off of the cruise ship. And he speaks out both sides of his mouth. So how can anyone develop a trusting relationship with that man?
Okay, the Center for Disease Control in 2017-2018, according to CNN, reported that 80,000 people died from the flu, from the common flu. We keep hearing about all these people dying with COVID-19. So the numbers, I mean, you see, they say the U.S. military, according to military.com, said, hey, 600,000 of y'all, that's how you say it in Oklahoma, 600,000 of y'all you all have COVID-19. Then they come back the next week, oops, you don't have COVID-19. We keep hearing people are dying with COVID-19. Can you please explain to the listeners out there, myself included, that don't know, how many people have actually died from COVID-19?
Well, it's great that you brought the question in with the influenza, because since 2014, the CDC reported the deaths from influenza, coronavirus, RSV, and SV. These are different respiratory viruses separately. They actually reported the data separately. In 2015, they started combining them into influenza disease. This is before coronavirus was such a big deal. And in combining them, the number of deaths that they say were due to influenza went from about 5,000 a year to about 55,000 a year.
Wow.
And so it's an absolute fraud, 100% fraud in the way that they report it. And they can say that they're trying to err on the side of caution because we really don't know what cases are RSV, SV, or coronavirus. Now along comes coronavirus, and it's taking its fair share. And we started tracking coronavirus deaths reported from the state to the CDC, so we were going to compare them to the deaths that were reported from CDC, and then all of a sudden they lost the books, and they lost the keys to their bookkeeping. They lost the data for a while, and so the reality is, on top of the data cook factory, the fudge factory as I call it, the CDC has become. The testing is absolutely atrocious. The testing being so bad, if they test a cadaver, we don't know if that test is a false positive. We don't know if it's a false negative. We really absolutely have no good idea of what number of people have died from coronavirus. But we know for certain that, say, Dr. Deborah Birx came out and she said, we're going to start counting all of the cases that have died with as died from. And then now, just last week, Fauci was making an argument that, no, it really means that they died from. So, I mean, no, we don't know.
No.
How about that?
Okay, now Dr. Andrew Kaufman, a medical doctor from MIT, Duke, the Medical University of South Carolina, he was on video doing an interview, and I put a link to it on today's show notes, stating that these tests, are wrong the vast majority of the time. Now, I'm not a doctor. You are. Please explain to me how these tests, he's saying that these antibody tests are systemically wrong, consistently wrong. How are they wrong?
Well, the antibody tests it's really a smoke and mirrors. The antibody tests would be useful if they're testing for the type of antibody that tells you if you have immunity, but they don't. They tend to focus on the antibody that tells you whether or not you have an active infection. But those are not the tests that are actually used for tracking. The tests that are used for tracking are the CDC, or the CDC put out a faulty test. It was an RT-PCR test. They shipped it out all over the country. And then doctors started saying, yes, but this person has the glass-like opacities in the lung in the lung scans. This person had all the symptoms of COVID, and yet your test says that it didn't. We developed our own PCR test. We found that there's something wrong with the PCR test. So CDC started this smoke and mirrors campaign over testing. And then just recently, Dr. Singhang Lee last month published a study. He's out of Milford, Connecticut, that showed that 1/4 of the tests that were conducted by CDC must be wrong. The estimate is 1/4 of them are wrong because the samples that we know contain coronavirus, because he actually sequences the actual product of the PCR reaction, which is how it's the FDA recognized as a gold standard. He found reference sample sets that labeled COVID-19 negative sent to him that were absolutely positive, and he found reference sample sets that were labeled negative that absolutely had the virus in it. And so it's a mess. Testing is an absolute mess. And again, I want to reiterate, go to my blog at jameslyonsweiler.com and read CDC's deadly testing fiasco, or go on WWDNYK Studios and look for my podcast on Breaking Science. I reported on this March. I did this way back in March when I said these guys are messing it up. It's horrible. They don't know what they're doing, or worse, which means they may be doing it on purpose. And I'm not a conspiracy nut, but I'm just crazy enough to say, hey, if you're going to try to push a vaccine, you probably want to make sure that we don't really know what's going on.
Okay, now I wrote this book called Fear Unmasked, and I decided to reach out to my literary agent, Esther Federkevich. She represents Tim Tebow and myself and other Christian authors, okay? And she reads the book, vets the book, and she emails me. It's the craziest thing ever. She says, your book's been banned for hate speech. Now, this is like in May. There's no, my book, and by the way, you could still buy Mein Kampf, Hitler's book. You could still buy Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, but my book was banned for hate speech. Anyway, long story short, we did some reaching out to certain key people. Next thing you know, Elon Musk comes out in the news talking about Amazon is corrupt and they're banning books. And so my book got unbanned. So you can now buy my book. But the point is, it's like their information is being hidden from people. So I interviewed Dr. Ben Carson, the U.S. Housing Secretary, on the show. I interviewed Dr. Scott Jensen from Minnesota on the show. And I just keep hearing the same thing, is that everything about this, the models are wrong, the tests are wrong, and now we get all these credible people saying the same things. And now the thing I'm worried about is a lot of smart people are saying these vaccines that are being pushed by Bill Gates are not good. Now, I'm not a doctor. I go back to this. I was a former disc jockey. I'm perhaps the least credible person in America to talk to you about vaccines.
I'll take your word for that.
But I've been doing a lot of research on this, and I keep hearing from very credible people, can you please explain to me what about the vaccines? Should we be worried about these vaccines? Tell us about the Bill Gates vaccines.
So Anthony Fauci's and Moderna somehow arranged with the FDA to skip the early animal trials, and that was a really big mistake, because the animal trials, when you do a vaccine safety study, you're supposed to do phase 1 animal trials, which they did on all the past coronavirus vaccines, and we don't have a coronavirus vaccine. Why? Because it never made it out of phase 1. The early stage animal studies actually caused something called disease enhancement. The animals that got the vaccine tended to have more severe coronavirus infection disease when they were infected after vaccination. So I looked at the proteins in the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, and I did a comparison to human proteins, because if you have a viral protein that's similar in shape to the human protein, you can get autoimmunity. Imagine your body developing antibodies to fight against a protein based on its shape. And your own body produces the same or similar protein with similar shape. That's where autoimmunity comes from. And so I have a peer-reviewed publication in which I changed the phraseology to pathogenic priming. These vaccines could very well, especially with the spike protein or any other protein from coronavirus, could cause pathogenic priming, where they prime the human body for autoimmunity and serious illness that includes autoimmunity against immune proteins. It's very, very concerning to me.
Dr. James Meehan, a medical doctor, yet again, another doctor. I feel like we need to change the name of our show from the Thrive Time Show to the Thrive Time Show Doctor Show, just for maybe a few months here. The Thrive Time Show, where we interview only doctors, because it's hard to open a business if you're forced to be closed. So I interviewed Dr. Jim Meehan, the medical doctor, and he says, Clay, on OSHA's website, it clearly states, because I employ a lot of people, he says it clearly states you're not allowed to create a work environment where your employees are allowed to have less than 19.5% oxygen levels, around them. And I'm going, this is good information. What do you want me to do with it? He says, if you make your people wear a mask, it's going to cause them to get sick because it decreases their oxygen levels. They're having oxygen deprivation.
It increases their CO2 level, yeah.
It increases the CO2.
Yeah.
And I'm going, wait a minute. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a logical guy. And I'm saying, so you're telling me that we're going to make healthy people wear masks that will make them sick to protect them from a virus with a 0.02% death rate? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, why would we do that? He says,
but 0.02 is too high. It's way too high. The death rate can't be possibly 0.02, because we're no longer killing people on ventilators. Doctors are ignoring FDA. They're using hydroxychloroquine. They're using ivermectin. There's a great study that's coming out that shows that ivermectin is really super effective. They're starting to use Dr. Brownstein's protocol across the country. It's fantastic.
Doctor, I hate to cut you off. I just want to make sure you get this, because I want you to just slap me around for a second, okay? Because when Dr. Dan Erickson told me that the death rate, this was months ago, was 0.02, I had to go back to my public school days, and I'm going, well, if you carry the two, that means out of every 10,000 people that contracted COVID-19, 2 would die. That's what 0.02% means.
Right.
And you're telling me that's too high?
I'm telling you it's too high because we don't know what the results are from the testing. Remember, we just talked about testing, where they're saying all these people have coronavirus just because they tested positive for a virus. The presence of the virus in the nasopharyngeal tract does not mean that you have an infection. Even if you have an active infection that's causing antibody production, it doesn't mean you have the disease. So if you die with, and you test everybody and you say, all these people died with this virus, like the guy from the motorcycle accident, did he die from coronavirus? Do we count his death or not, right? So the point is, it's way too high from the basis of the fact that they're counting. And every day that goes by, more and more doctors are coming over to the side of rationality and science. And they're saying the Henry Ford study was good. It wasn't bad like Dr. Tony Fauci said it was bad. It was a good study. There's now more studies that are showing that these treatments are effective. Dr. David Brownstein has a protocol. It's basically outpatient treatment he had 107 patients that he treated. 107. There were 0 deaths.
That's a low number, by the way.
0 deaths out of 107, right? And there was 1 hospitalization. And so to get to your point about Jim Meehan with the masking, right? The point is that masks themselves can harbor other respiratory viruses and make our children sick. I cannot believe that there are schools that are actually contemplating putting a cloth mask on a baby's face, on a child's face, all day long, 5-6 hours, when we know that surgeons like Dr. Meehan have to change their mask every 15 minutes.
Now, okay, so hydroxychloroquine, again, you're blowing my mind, and as we're going down the final 5 minutes of fury here, it's unbelievable. I want to have you on the show again. Hydroxychloroquine, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't run around looking up FDA-approved drugs. But when I heard Dr. Fauci gets on the TV and he says, well, we need to get clinical to double-blind studies that prove, if we don't have proof that hydroxychloroquine is safe, And I hear him, he always does that. Well, there's not proof that it's safe. And then so you're saying it's not safe. I'm not saying it's not safe. Should we wear a mask? Well, we healthy people should not be wearing a mask unless... Well, they should be wearing a mask. He's a flip-flopper, this guy. I don't know what, he's just a weasel. Anyway, so Dr. Fauci, the weasel, he's now saying that the hydroxychloroquine isn't safe. But this thing's been around for 4 decades, hydroxychloroquine. It's an FDA-approved drug for malaria. It's super cheap, and he's not going to benefit from the use of hydroxychloroquine because he doesn't have a patent on the thing. Can you please explain to me, is hydroxychloroquine dangerous? And if it's not dangerous, why is Fauci so obsessed with communicating to everybody out there that they should not be taking this FDA-approved drug?
So one of the things that I became expert in my 20 years as a biomedical research scientist is called translational research. That's how you go from the bench to the bedside and back. You've got a patient in the hospital, you go to you're going to develop a drug, you go back and forth between, all right, and how do you get the drugs to market? I did this, okay, for biomarker detection of early detection of cancer. Dr. Fauci is misleading the American public in a woefully irresponsible manner. I believe, and many people are starting to wake up to the fact that the emergency use authorization that they would require for the Moderna vaccine requires that you not have an effective alternative that's already available. Because if everybody can get hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, if everybody can use the mouthwash, there's a study that shows a common ingredient in mouthwash can kill coronavirus. If everybody can use readily available and cheaply available, then they're not going to get their EUA, and they could be fought against. So I believe that's the
now.
reason.
I interviewed Dr. Richard Bartlett. I just talked to him last night again. It's fun becoming friends with you guys. These logic people that love facts over fear. You guys are a fun group. So I'm talking to Dr. Richard Bartlett, and I'm going, Dr. Richard Bartlett, I just want to get this. You were the top medical advisor for Governor Rick Perry of Texas for 7 years. You have never had weird conflict of interest things in your background. You've never, he's got a great background, okay? A great CV, you might call it in your industry, the great resume. And you're telling me, Dr. Bartlett, that for $237, people without insurance can go buy a nebulizer and pulmicort, or budesonide is what's called, pulmicort, and a Z-Pack, and you can take this treatment and nobody you've treated has died. You're telling me on the record hundreds of people haven't died. And he says, well, yeah. And I said, okay, well, I just want to tell you, Dr. Bartlett, I want to encourage him. I said, my wife's best friend, Haley, was feeling super sick. The doctor said, you cannot take the hydroxychloroquine. You can't do it. You can't do it. So she had to go to a different doctor, and she got this silver bullet, the nebulizer, the budesonide, pulmicort, and the Z-Pack, and this just in. She's not dead. And I just wanted to thank him for that. But yet you see these people getting mercilessly attacked all over CNN, ABC, NBC.
They have an agenda. That's the thing, Clay.
Okay.
It's clear. You can read their body language. You can read what they're saying. They can see how vehemently they are against it. They can't cite statistics. They don't say, back in 1985, there was 25% mortality on hydroxychloroquine in a trial when it was used for a respiratory virus.
Right.
They have nothing like that. So they do this arm waving baloney, which we really call it that in science. We call it arm waving. They're not arguing. They're just arm waving, and there's nothing behind it.
Okay, so I was just on Newsmax, and that's why I'm a little bit delayed today. I was just on Newsmax, and they were interviewing me, and basically the interview was about should we be trusting, as a common person, which I am as a former disc jockey, common man, should we be trusting Dr. Scott Atlas, the medical doctor from Stanford, or should we be trusting Dr. Fauci? Should we be trusting Dr. Scott Atlas from Stanford? Should we be trusting thousands of doctors that are all saying the same thing, or should we only be trusting Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx? And that was the question there. And I just want to ask you, Dr. Scott Atlas was recently appointed to the White House Coronavirus Task Force, and he said, I'm quoting, "The deadliness of the coronavirus is less than that of the seasonal flu for children." Can you share your thoughts on the deadliness of COVID-19?
Well, coronavirus, like we just talked about, the numbers, they're hard to derive an actual mortality rate, but relative to influenza, it's also very difficult because everybody thinks there are 50,000 or 80,000 deaths due to influenza. There's not. There's maybe 5,000 or 6,000 deaths per year. The whole point is CDC's MO has been to hyperinflate the risk of death due to influenza and now coronavirus so that they can maintain an epidemic status so that they can push a national vaccine program. So I would absolutely trust somebody whose message has been consistent. The CDC's been inconsistent. Fauci's been inconsistent. And the new guy, what was his name?
Dr. Scott Atlas, medical doctor. Yep.
Scott Atlas, so far, he's been extremely on point and very consistent.
I have a cure treatment protocol that I've been working on for COVID-19. I want to get your take on it, okay? It's going to involve the use of a cowbell. So step one, you get out your cowbell. And we all need a little more cowbell. So you do that. That's step one. Step two, you use the mallet to break your TVs or anything connected to mainstream media. You just Third, you get that $237 treatment. You get yourself a Z-Pack, a little budesonide, a little bit of a nebulizer to distribute it there. Do you agree with my protocol? Is that a good one?
Well, the first part's probably questionable, but Dr. David Brownstein's protocol is available at the IPAC journal called Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. This paper is a peer-reviewed case series study. You can find it at Science, publichealthjournal.com under the Clinical Translational Research section. It basically is vitamins, some nebulized iodine, and some other things. And like I said, there's a number of protocols that are out there. Zev Zelenko, Dr. Zev Zelenko from Israel, is extremely a strong proponent. He's had great success with Z-Pack and hydroxychloroquine. I think it's game over for the hydroxychloroquine denialists anyway, by and large.
Do you think it's game over for COVID-19 in terms of actual data at this point? I mean, if you were looking at real data at this point and saying, is this thing something we should be worried about? Is this something that should be locking down our states? Is this something that should be causing us to close our churches and shutter our schools? In your mind, is it game over for COVID-19 if we would just use the treatments that we know about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty much game over if we move to the Sweden model and we protect those who are allegedly at high risk.
Yeah.
We protect the elderly, but people with cardiovascular disease, people with diabetes, and we can open and let herd immunity take place in the population. Now, here's an interesting fact: if the testing companies have saved any tissue or any sample from the people that they did the PCR on,
yep,
then those samples might be verifiable by DNA sequencing. So we might be able to get an actual estimate of what the actual case frequency was in the future, go retrospectively on those samples.
Final question for you, then I'll let you get back to being awesome. You can say anything you want to. We have about 500,000 listeners that listen to this show every week. They take notes. We got a lot of, they're action-oriented people. They know that vision without execution is hallucination. They know that Thomas Edison said that vision without execution is hallucination. They're also Matthew 5:10 people. They know that blessed are those who are persecuted for their righteousness, for they shall inherit the kingdom. They're not afraid to share the truth. What do our listeners need to do? What do you want? What is the call to action? What's the thing you want to share before you drop the mic?
Yeah, absolutely. So call to action is to use Google or your favorite search engine and find the hydroxychloroquine petition, and also drop by, the two websites that I'm going to give you to stop by.
Yeah.
Are IPAknowledge.org. That's the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge. We do research in the public interest without profit motive.
IPAknowledge.org, sir?
IPAknowledge.org.
Andrew, will you put that on the show notes there? It's IPAknowledge.org. And what's the second website?
Well, we do peer-reviewed research through that institution, looking at the accumulation of aluminum, and we have a vaxxed versus unvaxxed study. The study that they said they couldn't be done, we've just submitted the vaxxed unvaxxed study with thousands of patients. So the other website that I would point people to is, it's time that we get back to the basics. The more informed and educated the public is through real education, not a standardized curriculum, but through real education. So we've launched IPAK EDU as an LLC. And we're teaching the basics. We have courses in biology, courses in law, courses in psychology, and courses in analytics, how to look at the numbers. We're going to bring hands-on knowledge to the public about the basics, all the way from basic biology up to through genetics, college-level courses at ipak-edu.org. And we're enrolling students right now into Biology A, and the registration deadline is the 16th, and I hope to get a lot of people to sign up because I want to educate everybody. Everybody needs to know biology in today's age to get into these discussions in the public square. It's very important.
Dr. James, you are absolutely a treasure trove of information. I appreciate you unapologetically sharing the truth. I appreciate the fact that you don't have a conflict of interest and that you're trying to sell us all something. You're just trying to share the truth. I really do appreciate you for boldly stating those facts on today's show.
Thank you so much. We're gonna kick this can all the way down the alley, and it's gonna be a long time before they come back at us, brother.
Amen. Well, you have a great day.
All right, you too.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!
If you don't understand you're the one, you won't understand why you're being attacked like you're being attacked. Whenever the enemy knows that the one is coming, he always sets traps to stop them from succeeding because they're the one. And to him whom much is given, much is required. And so the text starts out talking about Abraham because Abraham is the one. And Abraham had to move out from his country and away from his kindred because he was the one. So he was a misfit because he was the one. So he didn't get to stay because he was the one. So he had to live in isolation because he was the one. So he probably was lonely because he was the one. Because he was the one. Because he was the one.
New city, new state, it's gonna be a mean race. All the sins that I have done, I'm grateful for a clean slate. Felt like I was different, I ain't never tried to prove it though. Stack your chips, get on your grind, don't never make excuses, bro. Solid as a rock, loyalty is all I ever know. Doing what you've always done, then homie, you can never grow. Conversations with the Lord are asking would I ever blow. Told me I got dead weight, so friends, I gotta let them go. We don't make it. I know that they hating, it's all on their faces. We destined for greatness. I said, I've been patient. I know it's my moment, no stopping, we going. This thing is in motion. What you gonna do when your back's against the wall? You gonna stand up like a champ or you gonna curl up in the ball? I'm the one, I've been chosen, so I'm riding through it all. Gotta keep your faith up so you can rise and never fall. Let's go.
And Abraham had to move out from his country and away from his kindred because he was the one. So he didn't get to stay with his kinfolks because he was the one. They are always on the hit list because hell knows that he is the one. I want to talk to some people that have been up under crazy attack. And to him whom much is given, much is required.
The devil's been attacking, I ain't stressing from it. Cause every time that happens, there's a blessing coming. Obsessing over problems that you can't change. I have you going crazy, learn your lesson from it. Remember when they cut my water off, homie? Man, reflecting how they cut my lights off too. Dog, I had to move back in with my mama. Had me feeling like a failure, that's what life would do. Gotta get up on your grind, I had to make the right move. Ramen noodles every night, I had some beans and rice too. Execution is the key, don't tell me what you might do. Favor from the man above, no other God is like you. You can knock me down, but I promise I ain't staying there. Feeling like I am the one, we just begun, let's make it clear. Me and Clay clicking up, y'all don't even get it, bruh. About to be colossal, taking over when we rip it up, hey.
And Abraham had to move out from his country country and away from his kindred because he was the one. So he didn't get to stay with his kinfolks because he was the one. They are always on the hit list because hell knows that he is the one. I want to talk to some people that have been up under crazy attack. And to him whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah, started from the bottom, now I'm here. Hoping that success after 23 years. Got the dragon energy, got another gear. Got a superpower, man, I call persevere. Cause I never have it thought people call fear. I never stopped writing when the future's not clear. We're gonna be dead soon and I'm just being real. So I'll be paralyzed by the thoughts that we feel.
So you'll stop begging for people to come into agreement with you. So you'll stop doing polls and census and trying to get everybody to come into consensus with your vision so that you won't need nobody to say amen when you preach, because you already know that you got heaven saying amen. The power of one.
Listen to the entire T.D. Jakes sermon, Grasping the Moment, by visiting T.D. Jakes' YouTube channel, simply named T.D. Jakes.
Shut